Everyone, welcome to the New Media Show. My name is Todd Cochran. Of course, I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Rob Greenlee. Good morning, Rob. How are you?
Doing terrific, Todd. It's great to be back with the New Media Show. You know, talking about all of the dirt and gossip, and I think there's going to be some teachings today, isn't there?
And what's kind of funny here is, we, as we've told everyone for many times, we do no show prep. We just show up and go. But this morning, when I rolled out of bed at 4:40 in the morning to, get the studio ready and everything, I came into the office and, what do? You load email up and you make sure the sky isn't falling for anything that's, happened in the 5 or 6 hours you've been asleep. And then you go on the face bags and, see if you can, if there's anything going on over there. And I was immediately, this is a word no grown adult should use. You should never use the word triggered, but I was triggered this morning, and it really set in motion some things that makes me want to have a little chat today about the podcasting space and where we're at and where we were. So I actually entitled the show today "Time Machine."
Yeah. So is it a way back machine or a way forward machine?
Oh, it's a way back machine. We're going to go back, but
okay.
Let me just explain first. We got so much stuff to go through. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but we could probably spend 90 minutes on this topic alone. But so, go on and I'm reading the face bags, and there's someone that is just scorching the earth on Podbean over Spotify submissions. And, we've been getting more and more emails from podcasters, even us, saying, why am I not in Spotify yet? And we're like, calm down. We send them an email back responding that they've put a global podcast distribution partner network hold on. No one's getting into the into Spotify. And matter of fact, Spotify stats are running behind. It's their listings aren't updating. It's a mess. And well, it's our fault. So this morning, this individual was scorching the earth on Podbean, not satisfied with their response to saying that, telling them the same thing. And so initially I started to write in this Facebag post the normal response that we send podcasters to kind of like, and everyone else had been saying the same thing to this individual. But I got to the point where I finished it and I'm like, let's be frank.
Okay.
Let's be frank. Rob, what year did you start your podcast?
Very, very first podcast?
Yeah.
2004.
Okay, so I started mine in 2004. Now, Rob, let's just take the time machine. Woo, 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 woo. Let's go back in time. We need a sound effect for that. So did you submit to iTunes?
No. Well, I mean, eventually I did.
No, because guess what? It existed, but what didn't exist?
There was nothing else out there.
Okay. So you're following my track here. Did you post that you launched your show on Facebook?
No.
Why not?
Because there was no Facebook.
Okay. How about Twitter?
Twitter came out of a podcasting company that failed.
Instagram. Did you post your show to Instagram?
No, Instagram was many years in the future.
So what social media platform did you use in 2004 to promote your show?
My website.
No. And you can't have a website, Rob. So what social media, what thing did you use to promote your show?
Probably chat forums. I don't know.
Okay, so you're following along here with my line of thought.
AOL,
AOL, or MySpace, maybe, right?
Prodigy,
Oh, there we go. Okay, so my point.
Alta Vista
Oh,
search engine.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So my
I
point
got it. Yeah.
exactly. It didn't exist. It did not exist. So, and
So what's your point, Todd?
my point is, I want podcasters to think. I want them to start thinking for themselves and say, and take, I really want people to do a hard exercise. Take 1 hour. Take 1 hour. Get off your computer. Get off your computer. This is serious. I'm very, very serious. What would you do today to promote your current podcast if none of this stuff existed? If there was, and then I know this is hypothetical because it does, but if it didn't, what would you do? What would you do without Facebook, without Spotify, without Pandora, without iTunes or Apple Podcasts? What would you do without all this stuff? What would you do without your hosting provider? Um,
Yeah.
what would you do? And how would
That's
you?
exactly what I did when I started. I didn't have any of that stuff. I had to handwrite my RSS feed too.
Me too.
So, yeah. So it was the beginning of the medium. It's
Sure,
probably
sure.
not it's probably not entirely fair to force people back into that time.
No.
But I do appreciate your exercise here, because what it does is it takes people back to the foundations
Right.
of what they're doing and thinking about, how do I reach people if I don't have these crutches? And I would say that they're crutches in a way, because basics of marketing don't typically involve social media platforms.
No. And if you think about it a little bit here, just think about this exercise. We're not asking anyone to give anything up. I wouldn't want to, thank God we got these tools today. Let's be frank. It makes things easier. And
that's the point, right?
And that's what the hosting providers, and this is what we've done. We've tried to make it easier. So,
yeah.
But even in those early days, and I've told this story a 1,000 times, and you've heard it, Rob. When I started, my story was I was a blogger, and a horrible one. If I was lucky, I had 300 people a week read my blog. Okay. That was, so when I became a podcaster, it changed the whole dynamic of what I was doing and who I was reaching, and it goes really right back. And I think, here's the prop I pulled. That should look familiar to you, right?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. So this is, this is my book. And it's for those of you that don't know, this is like long in the tooth, but actually there's some good scenarios in here on what to do if you are, guess what? Don't have all these extra things to do. And amazingly, the title of the book is called Podcasting, quote unquote, the Do-It-Yourself Guide. The Do-It-Yourself Guide. The Do-It-Yourself. Because guess what we had to do? We had to do it ourselves. There was no one else.
Yeah.
There was no tutorials. There's none of that was available.
Well, Todd, and there is no section in that book talking about social media either. And it's also, it's a good exercise only from the standpoint that I think what it does is it takes you back to the foundations of how to market your show. And I think, certainly a website has a place in that.
Has a place.
So,
yeah.
So I would say it's a probably lesser place than it was back then.
Sure.
And then corollary to that is the search engines, right? Google.
Search engines, and I talk about building networks in there, about cross promotion, all this stuff that we had to do.
Yeah. And we should probably say, if you're tuning into this and you were expecting to hear about a big guest that we had on the show, I wanted to mention, because that name Google came up.
Right.
Well, that was going to be our guest.
Yeah.
So, We're not exactly sure when Google is going to appear, but Google will appear on this show at some point in the next few weeks to talk to us about their strategies and what they're doing in the market with podcasting today.
We should have said that at the beginning. Sorry.
Yeah. I know we kind of got into the content, but wanted to just share that because I did tease that out there, and people are maybe coming in saying, "Well, who's this big guest that you have?" Well, it's coming. It's the gentleman that's kind of leading the current initiative at Google for podcasting. In Android is going to join us on the show. I'm trying to negotiate that right now with him, and I was hoping to get him today, but he's got some family commitments that got in the way. So at some point over the next couple of weeks, hopefully.
And if we need to do a special episode on a weekday when he comes in, we can do that too. So
sure,
we can work that out. So and also, what am I holding in my hands? So I didn't have to go too far. This was a premium product, 700 some, I can't remember. How much were these? They were expensive.
They were like $5.99, $6.99, something like that. They were expensive.
And I'm holding a Gen 2 30 gigabit iPod in my hands. And, this was the premium podcast listening app in existence. And then we had other devices, and I've got one. I have stuff in here to remind me of my roots.
Yeah, I have some old smartphones around here too. That
I've got an iRiver MP3 player and some stuff. Yeah, so I think the point here, really, without beating a dead horse, is as podcasters, we can't rely completely on golden bullets to build our shows. You can't rely on Apple Podcast and Android and Stitcher and all these distribution points to build our audiences. And how I built a hugely successful audience without any with any social media. Now let's put 50 percentage points advantage to being early. Let's use that as a we probably had at least a 50% advantage being early. But if you remember right, the space exploded. I don't know, how long did it take to get us to a couple thousand shows? It was almost instantly, wasn't it?
Yeah, Apple launched with about 2,000 to 3,000 shows in 2005, which was about 6 months after the medium actually started. So Apple was pretty quick on supporting podcasts.
Yeah, July of 2005 is when they came in.
And so I guess it was almost a year, I guess. It was maybe a little under a year from the time when podcasting actually started to when Apple supported it. And it grew fairly quickly, though, Todd. I mean, I wouldn't say that it grew exponentially fast.
Right.
I mean, I think that there's this perception in the market right now, especially right now, that thinks that this medium is exploding, and I guess there's some evidence of it. I know that it was just announced by Apple that we're now at 550,000 podcasts in the catalog now. Whether active or inactive is not. They didn't talk about that either. Saying that there was 25,000 new podcasts, but since April.
Well, April, May, June. Okay.
Which maybe that is an explosion, but it's an explosion in content. And I always think about things, Todd, and I know we've talked about this many times on the show, is that explosion to me means listeners.
Right.
Are we exploding in listeners? I don't know that we are. I think we're growing. I would like to say that we're exploding in listeners, and there's definitely an expectation in the market right now that we are exploding with listeners. But if we did, in fact, grow 25,000 shows in 2 months, I would consider that somewhat of a content explosion. And I would say, I hope that the listenership followed right along with that, because if it didn't, I don't know what that means in the long run.
Well, I would think, based on what I've seen, I could say 25,000 since January, because not since April. So,
yeah, I think was it Apple said something about 525,000.
no,
Yeah,
they said 550. They have 555,000 shows in their directory.
Yeah, now.
Right.
But when was their last announcement?
Yeah.
Because their last announcement was, I think they said 525. But I thought you're right, Todd. I thought that they said that back in like January.
So maybe, maybe it's been 25,000 in 3 months. I don't think so. I will admit, we saw a huge surge in January, February were some of the biggest growth months, at least internally for us, that we've ever had. So,
I don't know, Todd. I mean, I think, it's hard to tell what the growth is on the listener side. And I know folks like Google are focused on the listener side right now.
Right.
So, and I think I've communicated to them that's the biggest area that this medium needs to improve on.
Right.
Is that we need to get more people listening.
Yep.
That's the key to making this work. I don't know that we need more content right now. It's going to happen whether, one way or the other anyway. Well, but it's just, we have to support all those content providers, else people are going to quit their shows.
Right. So, and that really brings me to like the second thing is part of what, it kind of leads into stuff I've been thinking about all week. I made a post on the Facebag saying,
Facebag? Did you say Facebag?
Yeah, that's what I call it, Facebag. I made a post on Facebag the other day that I've been trying to. Facebag can be pretty unhealthy. And I try to take some, besides looking at our forums and places where podcasters hang out, I've been trying to stay away from that platform it's just for me, try to, because I'm not saying I'm having mental health issues. I'm not saying that, so don't someone take that the wrong way. But I'm just saying for my mental good well-being, I'm trying to take a little break from the Facebag a little bit.
Sure.
It's still a predominant place where I have to hang out. But hanging out in the podcasting groups, I could be in there 24/7 correcting perceptions and commentary, but then I'd turn into this, this jerk, this old curmudgeon that was in there, going, well, you should think this, but there's a lot of really, really bad advice being given right now. And I don't care I don't care what platform you're on or how you're doing your show and if you want a website or not. It's just some very bad, basic, fundamental advice. And this is going to come back and hurt us.
Well, let's parse that out, Todd. What is the predominant bad advice that's out there right now? I mean, what are we seeing out there? I mean, I see the industry kind of shifting a little bit to talk a lot about storytelling, right? Everybody's fixated on storytelling, right? Which is great. I'm not saying it's horrible. I'm just saying that oftentimes, and I saw this on my trip to Europe, is that people get so fixated on that they think that that's the only content that they can make. And that's what podcasting is all about. It's just a storytelling platform, which I guess if you really back up high enough and you look down on the medium, that's probably somewhat true. Every podcast that we do, you and I do, that I've always done, there's always been stories involved, right?
Right.
But I guess what I see happening out there too is that people are thinking that if they're going to do a podcast, they have to get a staff of 3 people and producers and editors and go out and do interviews and then come back and use Audition to put all these separate tracks in there and do all of this advanced editing and create this really unnatural audio experience, right? in contrast to what we do here, right? This is a stream of consciousness. This is a conversation. This is very real. This is very authentic. This is very who we are as people. Those other productions are contrived somewhat. Now, granted, the voices that are in those productions are real, but how they're put together is not natural, right? So there's two ends of the spectrum in the podcasting medium. And I found myself when I was in Lisbon, Portugal, talking to this community of journalists and trying to make sure that they understood the spectrum of this medium and not just get fixated on, well, I want to be the next lore, or I want to be the next murder drama mystery, or I want to tell this detailed production around some story, some news story. And so that's what I've felt. Anyways, I felt this kind of this gravitational pull that the only good podcast is one that's highly produced. So,
well,
anyway.
Okay. We know I don't have to tell my thoughts on that. You've been here more than 5 episodes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's come back up again, Todd. I mean, it's like in my face.
So,
every day,
in my opinion, though, on that is great. You want to produce that? Knock yourself out.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you want to do like
$1,000 an episode,
if you want to do that, knock yourself out. And if you want to do like I do and spend 10 minutes editing, knock yourself out.
Yeah, that's my opinion too. But there's people out there that I'm not sure that even realize that that's going on. So,
oh, that's funny.
Yeah. So because they're so fixated on that storytelling stuff, right?
Yeah. But I did laugh.
Balance.
I did laugh the other day. Someone had actually got the content ready before they got anything else ready. I thought, well, that's a first. Usually people are wrapped around the axle about getting all their technical stuff set up before they record anything. And a couple of gals had actually recorded 2 or 3 episodes, and then we're trying to figure out how to make the tech work. I'm like, yeah, that was good. I'm glad, was kind of happy because they actually recorded something. So, and I think the key here is there's no rules. Todd has his opinions. Rob, you have yours.
You bet.
But I think in the end, if you're listening to this show and you encounter a new podcaster, I hope that you'll take tidbits of what both Rob and I have shared over the years and form your own opinion and then provide a guiding hand. Todd and Rob can't guide these podcasters, but people that are listening to the show that have been here for 209 episodes and have a PhD, I think, I still learn stuff on podcasting. So if you've listened to this show for 209 episodes, you have a PhD in podcasting. You should be well qualified to go out and help a new podcaster get running in the model that you think is successful and has worked for you. Because we can't do it on our own without you. Where the hosting happens, those cards are gonna fall where they may, and but as content creators, that's what I started. I didn't start this podcasting to start a business. I just kind of fell into it. So in the end, I'm still a creator first and foremost. And I think that's maybe part of the problem too. And some, you and I've talked about this, that, you podcast, I podcast, Rob Walsh podcast. But a lot of the other major groups, they don't podcast. Their leadership doesn't podcast.
Yeah.
They don't know the grind. They don't know what it sucks to have a 1-star iTunes or Apple Podcast review or not get a comment from a show. They haven't had that challenge. They don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree with you, Todd. I think that's a big shift in this medium over the last, 10 years, is the shift away from people being involved in the medium professionally that aren't involved in doing podcasts themselves. I mean, for most, the early days of this medium, everybody that was involved in it was a podcaster, right? So, and that's, and I guess, Todd, I mean, that can probably come across as kind of like us, maybe playing a little bit of an elitism game, that somehow we're better than all these people. But it's not really about that. It's more about, can you understand what the issues are?
Yes.
And I think that's the challenge.
I have. It's here. I'm using words that are beyond my. Like, you guys got to remember, I grew up just country boy. Okay.
Yeah.
I do have a degree, but it was in aviation, fixing things. But so I guess the correct word is empathy. I have empathy for podcasters. Is that the right word to use? Empathy. We can or we're sympathetic. Yeah.
Yeah. We can associate.
Right.
And I think that's the key thing, that if you look at both you and I and Rob, we've been there the whole duration. We've been there since the beginning. We've experienced the highs and the lows. We've had our frustrations. We've had our shows come and go. Well, probably me more than you guys. You guys have been pretty consistent.
Well,
you've been all over the map.
Because you've changed employers every 2 weeks.
and podcasts. I've probably pod faded way more than you guys have.
Well, I pod faded on one of my own shows, and I'm trying to resurrect it. Yeah. So I'm not immune.
No. Nobody's immune from pod fading. That's for sure. Yeah. So,
and anyway. I think listeners are also not immune to going away from shows for a little while too. So
taking a break.
Yeah, they need a break from me or you.
That's right. Tired of hearing that droning voice.
Yeah. But I don't know. I just, so this morning when I was, thinking about this, my frustration, if I spoke the way I really wanted to speak, I would be labeled because sometimes you just want to yell. Sometimes you just want to yell. This is why I don't have don't do any customer service stuff.
And Todd, sometimes you walk right up to the line on your Facebook posts too. It's like, do I want to go that far? Yeah.
So I just think that, and we have opinions, and that's what we are. We're podcasters. We have opinions, and it's a good thing.
Yeah.
We have dialogue. That's why, that's one thing, Rob. Podcasters have dialogue. Isn't that a unique concept?
Yes. And we have these microphones.
That's right. Yeah,
that's what makes us different.
My grandfather, he lived to be 99 years old, but right up until his dying days, he would nothing more than love to have, his friends or whatever, and they jaw on about, the politics or whatever of the day. And he would purposely just he would become devil's advocate just on purpose, just to liven up the debate, and drop a turd in the middle of a conversation, and I think that's what podcasters are good at, is having this, having these conversations. I think that's why the medium is raging popular as it is. And you hear a little diversity in the spoken word too. So I just for user podcasting, just help these new podcasters, help us make them successful, and we're going to do our best to work hard to hopefully build audience, because we know this is, Rob, you've been harping on this for a long time, the audience piece. I think that's your campaign. You've been on that campaign since for a millennia here. So, but I think it's becoming more and more important.
Yeah, it is. The more content that we have, the more important audience is. And I don't know where we're at with that. There's no common metric that's out there that we can track audience.
Yeah. I think though, we see the volume of listeners going up. But I think what that really relates to, though, is, it's that circles of influence, 6 separations, whatever that theory is.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have new podcasters coming into the space, they're at least then exposing to their circle, their immediate, if they, let's say it's a two-person podcast, there's at least, them and maybe a boyfriend, girlfriend, significant other. That's one level. And then they've got mom, dad, grandpa. That's another level. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and then their friends. And, because, even though some of my aunts have no understanding about podcasting, they tell me my nephew, he podcasts and you go check him out. So we do have this circle of influence increasing by the number of podcasters, which are going to bring more people in to listen to those shows and then explore outwards. But podcasting today, I think, is the word is known. People know what they are. So I don't think that we have any issue there. But right, just get someone to subscribe or to listen to a show is key. But that goes right back again to fundamentals. What are we doing in our shows for that one stray? Let's just call him a stray. That stray person that wanders into the yard. It's like that stray cat. Do you yell at it and shoo him off, or do you give them some milk and feed them and then hope they come back again? Well, cats, you don't want them to come back. That's a bad analogy, but you want them to hit subscribe, right? You want them to hit subscribe. So in our shows, are we making sure we're giving them an opportunity to subscribe and telling them where to go to subscribe, besides sending them to Apple Podcasts? I love Apple Podcasts, but if that listener is an Android listener, I sample. I've told you I sample 100 shows every 2 weeks. 80% of them never, ever, ever, ever mention the word Android and how to subscribe on the show. We're our own worst enemy.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of the platforms, like Spotify is another example. I don't believe that they have a subscribe type of an approach.
Well, that's a one-off, and we understand that. But we still, within our shows, if someone's listening on Spotify, you can tell them, hey, come over to my website at, such and such, wherever wherever your show may live. And you can subscribe right on the website. Once you get there, you can click and you can subscribe on Android, subscribe on podcast. That way you'll never miss a single episode. As long as we're doing that every episode, because if you don't do it every episode, that stray that wanders in and does that one-time listen, at least you've triggered them. There's that triggered word. You've triggered them to say, oh, I can subscribe to this podcast. Maybe they don't subscribe to yours, but maybe they'll subscribe to the next one. So it's a collective effort here.
Todd, do we think that looking long term, that the analogy of subscribe is something that you think will last?
Well, according to Apple Podcasts, download is still king, so I would say yes.
Okay.
For the midterm, again, do we care?
Well, I guess my question really comes from more of a practical perspective. Do we the ideology of subscribe really could just be taken down to the level of metadata, right? It doesn't have to get to the media file, right?
But people better pray. The way some podcasters are running their shows, they better pray people subscribe, because otherwise, how do they even find them?
Yeah. Well, it's also, becoming a reoccurring experience in listeners' lives, in your audience's lives. How do you, the whole premise, and I guess this gets back to the very foundation of what podcasting, what it was birthed on, the concept of, and that's convenience. And what I see starting to happen as we move more towards the streaming direction is that we're starting to lose that. We're starting to think that convenience is more about just being able to click the play button versus the convenience of subscribing and getting the media file delivered to you maybe there isn't a big difference. Maybe just having the media metadata delivered to you is good enough, right? I mean, if we always have internet connections, why do we have to download the file? Those are questions, but I'm not sure that we've matured the medium enough to help people understand that maybe subscribe doesn't have to be a download. Maybe subscribe is a download of the metadata. I don't know, Todd. I mean, I'm just throwing this out as you look to the future. Is an automated pull on the media file in every situation the direction this medium is going to go, or is it going to be you subscribe or your favorite? Which is another term that some platforms use. I know that the Spreaker podcast radio app for iOS and Android uses the term favorite, right? Which maybe is a little bit of a looser connection to a show than the word subscribe. I think subscribe is a term to describe a pretty significant commitment, right? Where favorite means it's like a bookmark favorite in your browser. But is that where we're going with this ubiquitous internet access, where the media file can be pulled from the server at any moment, versus the reason that we did the synchronization because we had to transfer it to that iPod that you were holding up earlier on, Todd?
Yeah, it's. I think that's what a lot of people have been trying to come to grips with. This is exact what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Until there's, here's the, I just look at my lifestyle. And for me, I'm on the go a lot. And just like everyone else, my phone doesn't leave my side.
Mm-hmm.
It sits people used to say when you got married, you had a, 8-pound bowling ball attached to your leg. And that might still be true, but, you've got this is the other bowling ball, is this mobile device. And, and always trying to make sure it keeps charged. But even if, let's say I get news flash alerts, which happens on my phone. And it comes up and it flashes, goes, oh yeah, that's cool. And I look away. So if I have a news flash that Geek News Central, a new media show, or the Spreaker Live show is updated, oh, that's cool. Great. And I continue doing what I'm doing because I don't have time to react right then. Mm-hmm. But do I remember that? Because 3 seconds later, I get a notice that from Facebook, or I get a notice from Twitter or whatever, and I'm just being inundated with it. So, 2 days later, I go, oh yeah, that Spreaker Live thing. Let me go find that. Well, I think until we find a way to have it stick, that notification stick, and say, this is important, you haven't reacted to it, you haven't listened to it, until we can get it to stick, I don't see how we overcome that hurdle. It's a complicated...
Well, yeah, I mean, Todd, stick is commitment, right? A stick is equivalent. I don't think there's anything more equivalent or more committed to than the word subscribe, right? Anything less than that feels like it's a half commitment, right? It's almost like, okay, it's here, but am I really committed to it? So what you're really talking about is the commitment on the part of the listener. So how do we bridge this divide? Because it feels like to me that in the past, anyway, making that commitment to subscribe and download was a commitment that listener made to that content, and they felt like, well, I paid for that content to be delivered, I better well listen to it, right? Where maybe if it's just metadata, maybe people feel less committed to it.
But how do you get that metadata to, and I'm using the word stick because I don't know other word to use, how do you get that metadata to be there reminding you you've got content, you've got mail? How do you...
Well, I mean, how do we do that with a subscription, Todd? It's the same challenge, right? It's just metadata or versus a media file.
But it's at least the app icon is there saying podcast, Pocket Cast, Overcast, whatever it may be. And
people are used to that today, though, Todd,
they,
with their messaging.
of
right?
course, but
Yeah.
but a lot of people are saying subscribe is dead. Well, okay, then what do you want to do? How do we get people to commit to listen to the show? Like you're just implying here.
Yeah.
You know, I want you to subscribe. Go to newmediashow.com and subscribe. Click on the subscribe button, please.
Yeah, that takes commitment. That says I'm going to go here and I'm
Right.
going to take this action, and then I'm going to get this result from that action.
Within the first 60 to 90 seconds of my show, I have told the new listeners to go to my website. I even bring it up on the screen. I bring it up on the screen and show them the page if they're watching the video. And I describe where on the webpage where they go to click the button to subscribe. I do that within the first 90 seconds of my podcast because that's when the new listeners are going to be in or they're going to be leaving. So, I don't know. I think subscribe is with us for the near future. But, Spotify, the big thing about Spotify, I can't find anything in Spotify. Good, it is okay, you load it, you search, type the name. Nope, that didn't work. Type the name. Oh, yep, I got the name right this time. Yeah. Maybe I'm old. Someone tell me what I'm doing wrong. What is the attraction? How are you finding the content that you want to listen to? Does it just show up? Is it part of a playlist? How are you? Because we did get some emails from some folks that are on Spotify, and they were showing great numbers. So the examples we were sent, 6, 7, 8% of their audience was listening on Spotify, which frankly blew me away. So they got something going on over there.
Well, I'm sure, Todd, that they're sharing links to their show page on Spotify. I mean, or they're in social, or they're putting it on their website, or it's
All right. So that's
there's some other way that people are finding it, and I think that's an important thing to think about too. Is I think a lot of listeners use Google to find their podcasts.
Oh, that is
makes logical sense to me.
That just. I use Google as a tool to get them to the website by having found other content and then discover the podcast. Yeah, they'll find it if they search the name, but I'd rather them search a review on Samsung such and such TV and come into the website and say, oh, there's a podcast on this site as well. Click.
Well, that's going to happen too.
Yeah. So then that's round 2. And I do appreciate everyone that sent emails. We didn't have anyone send an email that showed less than 6% of their audience was on Spotify. So maybe we only got response from those of you that. So
it was a little self-selecting going on there, probably.
Right. But if you, so let's just, if you have less than 6% listening to your show on Spotify, please send us an email as well. It could be Todd@blueberry.com or Rob at voxnest.com. Either one will get to us. But the second part of this evolution is, how are you promoting Spotify in those of you that are successfully getting 6, 8, and 10% of your audience listening on Spotify? What are you doing? How are you making that happen? That's the next part that we need to answer, because I don't know. So please school these two old podcasting dudes.
Yeah, that's true.
So I know we've been all over the place here, but I think this is good stuff. At least I think it is. Maybe everyone else has left, but
yeah, I don't know about that. Yeah,
but I just. I think, Rob, you've brought this topic up before about is subscribe still valid, and where does it head? And I had to look for some input from the audience. My analogy or my philosophy has always been, I don't care how they get it, as long as they get it. I don't care if they come to the website. I don't care if they go to Stitcher. I don't care if they go to Apple. I don't care how they get the content, as long as they get the content. And as long as my content's everywhere where people are listening to content.
Yeah. There's lots of places you can get the content now.
Right. That's huge. That I
Yeah.
go there. The list, there's like 15 things I list off where they can go find the show.
And after a while, it becomes a little bit daunting to communicate that into your show every week too. I mean, I find it challenging, even on my own show, to share all the places to listen to my podcast. And is even mentioning all that in your show effective?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Here's what I say. You can watch the show on Roku via the Tech Podcast channel, or you can search for the show on Apple TV. You can listen on Stitcher or Blueberry.com. If you have a smart home device like the Amazon device or the Google Home or the Microsoft, all you have to tell those devices to do is play the podcast, Geek News Central. And I just go on, and I just, that's 45, 60 seconds I spend telling the audience every show where they can go and get the podcast. But I don't do that I do that for the new listeners.
Yeah, that's true. Where are the new listeners finding your show, though? That's my question.
I don't care where they find it.
Okay. But if they're finding you already...
Well, it's true. And most of them have probably come through the website.
If that's the case, then you've told them where else they can get your show.
So I hit them both ways. I hit them on the website, hit them in the show. The main thing is it's a reinforcement. The ultimate goal is I want them to subscribe.
Yeah.
They go over there and say, oh, subscribe, click, then they're subscribed. And if they're not a regular listener, hopefully they become a regular listener. It's persistence and long tail here. And I haven't changed that from episode, there was no Apple Podcast in the beginning. It was come to the website and subscribe via your favorite podcatcher with my RSS feed. That was all we could say on episode number 1. Back in the old days.
But I do wonder if we're going to run into a time here where there's just so many places, and is it a good use of your time or the listener's time to talk about all that stuff?
So if
every episode.
So if someone has come into Rob, my show's still growing. I still have the same sponsor since 2005.
I know.
So something's working.
Yeah. I'm just asking the question: is it better to get into the content, or is it better to talk about all its distribution? And I guess that's what I'm starting to wrestle with and wondering about. Right? At some point, it's not going to make sense to talk about your distribution in your show every week. I would think, right?
Oh, I don't know. It scares me to think about, because then. So I do that for the 10, 20, 30, 40, 100 that have come to the show and listened for the first time.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of churn in podcasting too, and I think we don't talk about that enough. I know when I was working on Zune, I saw a lot of data, which I don't get to see as much anymore as I used to, but just the churn of listeners around subscriptions. Like we were talking about subscriptions earlier, and there was like a 50% churn week over week on subscriptions. People were trying new shows out, people were unsubscribing, people were resubscribing. We just saw a lot of activity around that, and I don't know if that's happening as much now. I haven't seen that data in a long time around churn around subscriptions, or whether or not people are just coming in and clicking the play button. Like they have their favorite show, but they just go back to, they have it bookmarked on their phone, or they have it located somewhere, and they just go back in and then click the new episode, right? And just listen to it, off the play button.
The last survey I did, and I haven't done one in a couple of years, I had a line that went in as, have you unsubscribed and resubscribed to the show? I asked that in the survey. And there wasn't probably not enough statistical data to really get a firm grip on what was going on. But my indications were that people were listening to the show for about 2 years, and then they take a break. They take a 2 to 3 year break and come back. Now, okay,
2 to 3 year break and come back.
Yeah. Yeah,
those are long time tables.
But Rob, we've been in it 14 years.
I know, Todd. But it's amazing to think about it like that, right? That people listen to your show for a year or two, then they quit for 2 or 3 years,
And they
come back and listen to it again.
I get an email. Hey, I'm back. I haven't listened to the show for a couple of years. I'm back to listening. I get them all the time.
A lot of stuff can happen, right?
Yeah.
They have a baby. They get a new job. They are just too busy to listen to podcasts, and then they get some extra time, and they come back.
Or they get sick of me, or I pissed them off, or something.
Yeah. That never happens.
I at this, and some folks are like, I only been doing my podcast for 12 months, so I don't have that problem yet, but. So that's the key here. This is I'm thinking, where's the show going to be in 10 years? I'm planning where my show's going to be in 10 years. So
I'm going to be very entertained to see you do your show 10 years from now. That'll be interesting. That'll definitely. How will your show have changed?
Yeah,
from 10 years into the future, right? Than what it is today.
Yeah, and I go back and I listen to. Hey, you've been doing this a few years? Go back and listen to some episodes. Go back and force yourself to listen to some episodes.
20-year time span on doing a podcast. That's the ultimate testament to marathon podcasting. We should coin a new term.
Well, who's going to make it from the original group that started in 2004 is going to make it to 2024?
I don't know. I mean, if you think about it, at some point they're all going to start dying off.
Me included. That's why I'm going to the gym 5 days a week. Oh,
he wants to keep podcasting.
No, I want to be around. I'm having too much fun.
Yeah.
But on a serious note, though, you're talking about going to the gym and being around for a while. We've lost some people this week. And I'm just doing this as a PSA here. If you're having mental depression issues, we want you to talk to someone, please. Please. This is a big problem in this country right now. Suicide is a big deal. So please talk to someone. Mm-hmm. There's national hotlines. I don't have that number, but just Google it. They're there to help. If you're having depression issues, it's talk to somebody, please.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And your podcast, hey, I'm going to tell you, Rob, when my dad died, my mom and I did a podcast, and it was therapy. We only did like 30 episodes or so, but it was the best therapy ever.
Mm-hmm.
So podcasting can be a form of therapy. So.
Yeah. Actually, I think didn't Lipson put out a post on Facebook asking for podcasts that talk about mental health to submit to them, so they can promote them, which I thought was
smart.
It was a smart thing to do.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. This is Pride Month too, so we put a post out yesterday on good LGBTQ shows to listen to as well. So, it's I don't know. Anyway, I got us completely sidetracked now. I don't know. I guess we'll just see what happens with the space, but it's not the sprint; it's the marathon. But again, in order to be able to support the marathon, we have to have the listeners, and ultimately, we need to get some money in people's pockets. That's what we have to continue to work on too. Some don't care about the money, but for some, it's really important.
Yeah. Well, Todd, the activity over in Europe around podcasting continues. Next week is going to be another event over there. I'm not going over there for this one, but it's the podcast days in the UK that's going on over there, and there's quite a few U.S. based podcast folks that are going to be over at that event. Just wanted to mention, I mean, Europe is definitely picking up in its attention towards the podcasting medium. I think Tom Webster is going to be over there, and a few other folks from the U.S. It's part of Radio Days over in Europe. It's a pretty good size event that's going on over there. So just wanted to mention that as we start thinking in getting more engaged in the global scale of this medium. There's a lot of activity going on down in Australia, and I guess I'm getting pulled into some of this stuff too, and I'm just seeing more and more people from the U.S. getting pulled overseas to do stuff around podcasting right now, which I think is really interesting.
So, Rob, going back to your trip to Portugal, how was your message received?
Well, keep in mind who my audience was. My audience was journalists and big brands from around the world. Like we had the folks from Volkswagen. They were in the audience. We also had the leadership team from Greenpeace was in the audience, but a lot of journalism organizations from all over the world. Basically media companies, essentially. But and they were all really focused on trying to say, okay, we're a journalistic enterprise. How can we take what we do, which is basically write stories, news stories, and translate that into a audio program, a podcast. So that's what the premise of the whole thing was. And so there was myself and one other person who's a journalism professor that teaches storytelling and is very focused on audio. So we kind of teamed up and taught both ends of the spectrum, and it was really good. And I'm probably going to get pulled into doing more of these kind of things where we work with the content side, and then I'm more kind of on the nuts and bolts, right, of how to do it, how to launch it, how to promote it, how to market it, how to format the launch of a new show, which is what I shared at the event. So just these basics. So you have to have the complete picture. It isn't just being able to tell a story, right? It's be able to put the show together, get it distributed, get it in all of the listening platforms. Those are all important skills that these media companies need to have.
So it almost sounds like my podcast boot camp type of thing I was doing there for a while.
Yeah, the only difference was my sessions were very short. I only had, we had less than an hour to get it all presented to everybody. 2 days. So, but.
And I do 3 days locked in a room. Yeah.
Yeah, all day long, right?
And it's fire hose the entire time.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot to cover, and I was really clear with them on that. I said, this is just a scratch of the surface of what you need to know to get this done, and I'm sure I'll be back next year too, probably the same place doing the same thing, but maybe we'll do an advanced course next year or something. But I'm getting asks from other places around the country too that are around the world that want to put on these type of workshops as well. So, but it is very focused on storytelling,
right?
And that's the part, and that's why earlier on I was a little sensitive to that, because I just kind of sense the shift happening to everything is about storytelling now, and I don't know if that's good or bad sometimes. I mean, it feels like it's good depending on what the community is that's looking at the medium. So.
Well, if the storytelling is done in a way that's not contrived and agenda driven through commercial interest, I think it's great.
It's usually not.
Yeah. So the commercial entities are going to have to figure out how to thread that needle there to not annoy people, but at the same time tell and get their message out. And yeah. I think there's room for everything. For a while there, we had, what was it? We had about a run of about 18 months. Everyone wanted to do an entrepreneur show. That's kind of calmed down a little bit.
Yeah, and then 2009, 2010, everybody wanted to do a comedy podcast. I mean, we're going through these phases, right? And I guess, what's the next phase after storytelling? What's the next new genre that's bubbling out there? I think it's young people in this medium. I think PodCon is going to come back next year. I'm assuming, and I think there's just going to be kind of, that's going to be a up and coming genre of the podcasting sector.
I've always said that we need more storytellers, and if we do have true storytellers coming on, I think there's plenty of, I think more the merrier. I'd rather see more storyteller type shows than seeing more entrepreneur shows personally, because I think
I would too. Yeah.
Because the storyteller shows, I think, is going to help drive and build a bigger audience, especially if we can get some that have the same type of movement of some of these big storytelling type of shows have had. If we can get, a show that brings in 1 million listeners, that advances the medium a lot. So, more
Todd. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I do kind of. I was thinking about. I created a slide for one of the presentations that I've done here recently, and I had 2 columns on the slide. One was kind of reality based podcasts, and then on the other side was fictional. And what I realized when I was going through the reality side of that slide was that reality basically encapsulates lots of different genres of content in the podcasting space today. But the fictional side, the list was pretty short, right? I just kind of wonder if there's more opportunity as you look to the future for the fictional side of storytelling that we haven't seen explored yet.
That's when you get into some like super creative folks.
Yeah, that's the Hollywood folks,
right? Right. So I fully expect the TV folks to exploit this to the 10th degree. My recent talks coming out of NAB with some very, very, very top level people at some very top level organizations that you subscribe to on your pay TV service. They've got big ideas and budget that they're applying. Podcasting budget is a rounding error for them in show production.
As it should be.
Right.
Yeah.
So they put $100,000 on a single episode of a sitcom or whatever it may be, and throw $5,000 at the podcast budget per episode. You can do a lot of cool things with that type of money. So,
well, Todd, I'll invite Casey Whalen on. He's the guy that did the We're Alive series.
Yeah.
And see if he'll join us on the show sometime, because he's part of that Hollywood scene down there and doing fictional stuff.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to get his take on where we are with that, because I think it's one of those unexplored territories that he's been pioneering since 2009. He was one of the early guys to get into Foley dramas, and I don't know where we are with that. I would have thought that it would have grown a lot faster than it has at this point.
If you look at YouTube and some of the stuff that's popular over there right now, the stuff I'm following are lifestyle type vlogs. There's a couple of them. I just absolutely, I talk about waiting for the episode to pop. I know they announced their publishing time, and I'm like hitting refresh on the YouTube page, wait for it to load. There's a couple of shows that I'm really enthralled with over there, and they're about 14, 15 minutes. And of course, they've got millions of subscribers, as they should, because it's really that good. But the work they're doing to put that together is massive. So I think that lifestyle, if someone has an active lifestyle, and if they could have, and I think that someone that attempted to do this was, what's the guy in New York, wine dude, in your face.
Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yeah, Gary. I think he's tried to copy that model. But if you have the financial resources and you have a lifestyle that's kind of global, that's moving around, I think there's huge opportunity for a podcast that covered that in some detail. That it's almost like some of those reality shows type thing. It's a real life living reality show. I think those types of things would be good in the podcasting space. most of us live boring, dull lives. We get up in the morning, we take a shower, we brush our teeth, we shave, put our makeup on, and then, get in our cars, go to work, and come home and do laundry and, feed the kids and put them in bed. And, most of us are pretty dull.
Yeah.
It's life. And some people live some pretty extraordinary lifestyles. They live in that fast lane. And I think those fast lane type, many of us wish we could. Of course, if we did, we would probably fall over in exhaustion. But I think that some of those types of shows would be really, really good.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, it's more of a celebrity lifestyle kind of,
right, kind of like
concept.
that. Yeah, kind of like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just it's stuff that's out there right now that's cool.
Well, like Casey
yeah,
Neistat,
he's doing some cool stuff too right now. You know,
that's the kind of I think person or personality or type of programming you're talking about, right?
The person the show that I really love, my number one favorite, and I shouldn't even say this because I'm a podcaster. I'm not supposed to like YouTube. The number one show that I love right now on YouTube is done by a guy by the name of John Olson, JONOLSSON. Incredible vlogging, incredible lifestyle. This guy's pretty renowned. Once you've seen him, you'll know who he is. But he's sponsored by Red Bull and that type of stuff. So it's that type of a guy. And but incredible stuff they're doing on YouTube. It's an incredible channel. And you learn a lot. It's like you look at stuff and like, oh, I can use that. That's an interesting twist. Or, you learn from these good creators on stuff that you can do in your own. It, translates down into your regular podcast too.
Well, speaking of that, next week is VidCon down in Los Angeles, down at the Anaheim Convention Center. I was tempted to go down there to that just because that's just a huge influx of online media creators that tend to go there, but it is very video centric. And I guess, that's kind of an epicenter of, the type of people that I think can become very good podcasters potentially. I don't know, Todd, did you ever go down there to that?
I haven't been to that, but I've seen some recent transitions from YouTubers that are doing podcasts as well. And they're doing very, very well. I mean, and they're off the radar, but
going from podcasting to YouTube?
No,
is that what you're
from
saying,
YouTube,
or going the other way?
Yeah, going the other way. There's some that have really successfully transitioned, and I mean like really successful to the point where you're like, huh? And you're doing 1 million downloads an episode. You're like, what? So it's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But when you have 13 million YouTube fans and you start a podcast,
Todd, so where does radio fit into this? I've been thinking a lot about this from the standpoint of, you start looking at radio long term, and is radio, you think, are they going to have this last ditch effort, or it's like, let's take popular podcasts, and I know this is not a new concept, but I just wonder if it's really going to start happening more and more, is taking these popular podcasts and putting them on the air. I mean, are we kind of reaching a point of desperation on the radio side that's what's going to wind up happening?
Well, I don't want to really reveal too much, but I'll tell you this much, that those that get it are looking at podcasts that they like and doing probably what they do best, and that's syndication type deals. And not necessarily syndication on air. So what is I have to be careful here. Let's put it this way. They're looking at shows. Those that are smart are looking at podcasts to use in a variety of ways. And the key here is the podcaster's format is likely not going to have to change.
Yeah. It doesn't have to.
Right.
That's what radio needs to realize, is that it doesn't. the format of podcasting doesn't have to change to get on the air.
Right.
And I know back in the early days, Todd, there was a radio station in San Francisco. I think a lot of people don't realize this, but CBS Radio back in, I think it was 2005, had a couple of radio stations that were, you could go to this station's website and upload your audio.
My show was in rotation over there.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
I was too at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And they would actually play it in a rotational schedule. It wasn't a live radio station. It was like, they would play, it's basically a playlist, but it was over the air.
Playing
over the air.
It was going out a tower. Yeah, it was an FM station.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's been done before. I mean, I've had experience with that. You have. I just wonder if that's what's ultimately going to wind up happening here. Shows are going to be created first as digital properties, right? They're going to be created as podcasts first. And then they're going to be made available on these over-the-air stations. It's just going to be another place to distribute the content.
Well, they're just going to use the same model. They've just going to use the same model that they perfected already, is the syndication model. No one's done it better than radio. So, but
on satellite stuff, is that what you're saying?
Well, no, I'm just saying they're going to go and so example. Let's just use but
just transfer out.
I can't use it. I can't use a. Well, I have to use a controversial name because okay, let's look at Rush Limbaugh. He's on 800 radio stations or something like that. FM, AM, everywhere. So, okay, he gets paid for that syndication. He has advertising in his show, and the station runs advertising around it. He doesn't have a tower. He just records his show from his studio in Florida. So,
or is he doing it live, Todd?
Well, he's doing it live. He's live,
Live. I think that's the key difference here.
It is a difference, but there's not much of a stretch. There's not much of a stretch from doing a podcast like we're live. We could be on the radio right now. We'd have to make sure we didn't use the beep words, Yeah.
Yeah. Which we don't anyway.
Right. Not too much. Except I have Freudian slip or revert to my sailor days. You have no idea.
Don't get you a beer on the air.
Well, my friends always ask me, how do you not cuss on your show? So it's not that big of a jump. So they're going to have, Rob, come on. We know. Where is radio audience listening going? Timber.
Yeah, well,
it's a slow timber, but it's going down.
Yeah, but if you go to any of these radio events, Todd, they're all like, "We're the rulers of the world, man."
Keep drinking the Kool-Aid. TikTok. It's gonna take 20 years. It's
Yeah, it's gonna take time.
But I'm like I said, I'm planning what my show's going to be in 10 years. So
tell us, Todd, what's your show going to be like in 10 years?
But if you think about radio, is radio thinking past next week? Most of them act like
next quarter.
Right.
That's as far as they think.
Or the next ratings time,
Cycle.
Yeah. We got a long ways to go with the radio, folks.
Yeah.
Some are listening, and I had really good conversations at NAB. But again, how many radio stations? Well, you got Clear, not Clear, but iHeart. They own what?
Most of them. Yeah. 850 or 1,000 or something.
Yeah.
Like
then
that.
you've got the handful of other folks that own 40, 50, 100 here and there.
Cumulus.
Yeah. So then what are you left with? Independence. You're left with church. How many church stations are there? There's a huge number of church stations.
Yeah.
So, and then some public broadcasting stations.
And then the low power FM folks that have been ramping up over the last couple of years. Yeah.
They can reach 3 miles. So again, limited reach, but
yeah,
I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens to the radio folks. Sometimes you just want to take a 2x4 to their head. because they just, they are full of themselves. Actually, radio people remind me of venture capitalists.
Yeah. Okay.
If you think about it, have you met very many venture capitalists?
Oh yeah, over the years.
Okay,
Sure.
just think about their personality and radio people. It's almost the same.
One has more money than the other one.
Well, it's true. One has money, the other one don't. Yeah, you're right. You're right. But if they can't afford, and if I'm talking to radio stations, and I do every week, if I'm talking to them and they say, "Well, we don't have no budget," well, I'm like, if you have no budget for a podcast, you're done. You're done. Really? You don't have a budget for a podcast?
Well, they probably have a budget. They just don't feel like it's worth expending that budget on a podcast.
Well, it's
just a podcast, Todd. Come on.
And I'm like, this.
Do anything?
I said, do you guys hire interns? Do you have, I'm like, this doesn't have to be an expensive evolution, and oh man.
Well, that's what I'm always fighting against, Todd, is this expectation that it's got to be this huge production.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, well, if you're going to do a quality podcast, you have to have this, and this, and this. I go, no, and that.
Can you imagine us being on the radio every day and showing up, not knowing what we're talking about, and have a program manager having a meeting the day before asking what we're going to cover? They would flip out.
Well, a lot of those shock jocks, Todd, they have some idea what they're going to talk about, but they're riffing it too. I mean, especially if they're taking call-ins, they come up with a concept, an idea that they want to talk about in different segments, right? To some degree, but then it's driven by the audience, right?
But
and I think we kind of lose sight of that. I think in this medium, because we're not as interactive as call-in talk radio is.
No.
I think we'd all like to be a little bit more interactive with our audiences, but I hate to say, but the software and the technology hasn't really enabled that to happen yet.
Yeah.
We're still a long ways off from true interactivity with our audience. I don't know why it's taken so long, Todd, for us to have that. We should have it by now.
Well, it's build a tool, Rob. Go out and build one. Hey, Eileen makes a comment. She says, don't get Todd started in the F-bombs. So I usually don't drop an F-bomb on the show. I don't think I've ever done that before. Maybe I have once.
Yeah, those Navy guys, man.
that is a, how should we say that? That's part of the common vocabulary. Actually, and I'm being unfair to my Navy brother, and the Navy has cleaned it's a very professional organization.
Yes.
Yeah. That type of mongering in language is frowned upon.
Yes, it is. Dignified officers don't use the F word.
Yeah, right? Remember, I was an officer. I was enlisted, so.
I thought you were an officer.
I retired as a senior chief petty officer. That's an enlisted senior. I was a senior enlisted. So
okay, so you're at the upper limit of the enlisted
Well,
spectrum.
I wasn't at the top. I was one below the top, but
okay.
Yeah, high enough to get my way. And make policy change and make people's lives miserable if I needed to, or make them very pleasant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But, it was, getting back on topic here, I think that, radio, I'm a little tired of radio right now.
I am too. I'm burned out too.
They're driving me crazy.
I want to go to radio events.
They just come on, guys.
Yeah.
Get with the program. Quit making my life so difficult.
Yeah.
Podcasters are a dream to work with compared to radio people. Independence, a dream.
Yeah. I'm getting a little burned out of the radio folks too. But it's going to be interesting to see podcast movement. I've been spending a lot of time focused on podcast movement the last week.
Yeah.
So trying to get ready for that event and seeing all of the things that are going on there. We got all panels that I'm involved with pulled together, and so things are progressing.
We're finalizing marketing. I had to buy a new banner and backdrop because they're only 8-foot booths. So
I knew you were going to have to do that.
$670. I had to spend an additional $670 because there's not a standard 10-foot booth.
Fortunately, you can get 8x8 backdrops. So
yes, you can. Yeah. It's just now I have two. I have a 10 by 8 and an 8.
10.
Yeah.
A 10 by 8.
Yeah, because most booths are not 10 feet tall. They're normally 8. Yeah. Normal booth size is 10 by 8. The top for a backdrop.
I got you. Okay.
Yeah.
You can go up higher than that if you wanted to.
Okay. I attach to the back poles. I don't attach to, I don't take a frame.
Gotcha.
My backdrop fits in a duffel bag. So.
Yeah. Well, that's what it should do, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And of course, getting the marketing material ready and coming up with our slogan and what we're going to use for the show and all that stuff. So we've been focused on it too.
So you're not going to use your serial killer
not for this
tagline?
No, not for this one. No, because we've got something else planned, and I think you'll laugh when you see it. We hired a marketing company, and the marketing company's been brilliant. So we're very happy with their work. So.
Yeah. Ours is all internal.
Yeah, well, it's sometimes cheaper just to go outside.
Yeah.
And it's better to have someone have an outside look inside the glass window and, make suggestions and changes. So, yeah.
Fresh eyes.
Yeah, sometimes some of that will start to be seen over the next 6 months as we make some major changes. But it's just, it's evolution or de-evolution of a business, whichever way you want to look at it.
De-evolution.
You pray it's not that way,
Yeah, you've got big offices now. You got a lot of things to live up to now.
Yeah, I got $50,000 worth of office furniture arriving. Well, they pushed it back, so I can't even show pictures of the space right now because it's. And we moved from this 900 square foot office to like 3,500, and the $50,000 worth of furniture to fill the rest of the office is not in yet, so it looks kind of sparse. We're doing job interviews next week, and I said, please tell them there's furniture coming. They're going to walk in there and go like, what's going on in here? This is empty. This is a big room. So I've got them all crunched up. Yeah. So. Yeah, office furniture stuff sucks. It's expensive.
Yeah. Hey, Todd, did you explore around at all looking at the Apple Podcast changes in iOS 12?
Yeah, I did. I
plowed through that?
I did, look through it. So interesting what's going to happen with the iWatch or Apple Watch. And that's going to be cool. So I won't have to take my my phone I'll be able to be on the cross trainer with my Apple Watch and listen to shows through my headset. So that's going to be nice. And some good changes. Anything you specifically excited about?
Oh, I thought it was interesting that Apple is kind of going back to the future a little bit around chapters in the MP3 files. So it's interesting that which makes a lot of sense versus the AAC, which most people don't use for their podcasts.
But again, who's going to look at it?
I don't know. It's an interesting question. Why did Apple feel like they needed to pull the trigger on this right now? I don't know. It wouldn't have been my logical.
How's that going to be implemented then? How are you going to insert chapter information in an MP3? What's the tool?
It's going to have to go in. It's going to have to go in the ID3 area, I would imagine.
But what tool does that? How is that formatted?
Well, I know that Spreaker already supports chapters in our web player, so we have tools that will create chapters in shows right now. So for us, I think it's a pretty simple thing for us to take that metadata and put it into the MP3 file, whatever that format is that Apple is expecting right now.
Yeah. It'll probably be the same format as the AAC, but how does the AAC do it? Is it just ID3 tags with certain formatting? Or
I would imagine that it would be. Here, let's go look at it. I've got a page up. I don't know if they've put out a new specification. I would imagine it would be very similar to what they did with the AAC. I would imagine.
I have a hard time. Okay, if we get enough people asking for it, we'll support it. But we just, how do it's spend the dev time to support 1% or less that's going to use this feature?
It's tough. I agree. I mean, do you invest in it before there's any real proof or evidence that there's going to be adoption? I don't.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a recent history of adoption of interest in chapters, but maybe that had more to do with AAC than it did the concept. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know if it's worth diving into on the show to talk about how it works, but I don't know if there's anything that can be accomplished in these voice speakers by having chapters.
Maybe that's the play. Well, actually, think about the iHome. Would it disrupt the show to no? No, if the iHome could send a signal that would trigger your phone to do something, now that would be cool.
But most people aren't looking at their screens anyway when they're listening to a
That's
podcast.
Right. That's the thing. Mine's in my, my holder for my car.
Or is it a play around basically metadata for these smart agents to get into the content more? I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm just trying to think what the game plan is here. Why Apple is pulling the trigger on this.
Maybe they just said, well, we support an AAC. Let's just add it for MP3. Maybe it was a simple code fix. So, some engineer said, this is an hour's worth of work. Let me support it. And that's probably what it was.
But it's going to shift this whole development issue out to the community, right?
Of course. But
all of us are going to have to prioritize whether or not we're going to do this, or is there going to be third parties that come up with software that enable you to inject this stuff?
Well, how have they been doing it for AAC? They've been using, I think so far they've had to use it. Most people use iTunes or use Apple Podcasts, don't they, to do those tags in there? How do they do them now in AAC?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, the person to ask is Chris over at MacCast. He's done chapters from the beginning. I'll send him an email and ask him.
But I know, we've supported chapters in the Spreaker platform for years now. So it's just a matter of, porting that information over.
Yeah.
And what's the scope? Is chapters going to have more ability around images, or is there going to be some sort of a additional metadata layer that they're adding into here?
If they could have it so it adds a notification to my system, then that's cool, because I could put a notification for an advertiser in there. That kind of thing would drive. That's what drives adoption. Not chapter markers leading off to some website.
So like the ability to have a chapter that would display, let's say, a promo code for an advertiser or something like that. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or sends a notification to the phone where you can listen, but later on you go to the phone and there's the notification. You can click it, or notification of here's the link. So I send the notification to the phone, and you've got, from that episode, you've essentially got the show notes in your mobile. Now that's cool. Sign me up,
But maybe that's not a chapter per se. Maybe that's more of like an ad mark or something.
Right, a meta tag or something like we've done, on our system. Meta mark.
So maybe what we all need to come up with is, kind of like a bigger picture on this, right? Of goals. I mean, that's been one of the challenges I think a lot of advertisers have had, is being able to display the promo code in a way. I've always thought that what you would want to do if you have a promo code for a direct response advertiser, that you would want to have that somehow stored in your app somewhere, or,
Rob,
so yeah.
wrote the spec 10 years ago.
Yeah.
If you guys want to steal the spec, it's happy to share it. We've already wrote the spec.
Yep.
But it's because it's from us. Oh, no, we can't adopt that.
Yeah, right. It's got to be Apple's idea.
Or let me build my own,
Yeah,
So
that too.
that's okay. All right,
Todd, I think we made it through another show.
Oh, my God, we did, and then some. All right, folks, so, wow, we've covered a lot of ground today, and some of you have stuck with us on YouTube and on Facebook. We appreciate it. I heard Facebook was glitchy today from someone saying was having problems, but if you're watching on Facebook, and those of you that are with us on YouTube, thanks for being here. Those of you that are listening on demand by being subscribed to the show, the cool cats in the group, thanks for being here as well, and being on the live stream with us. We definitely appreciate your participation. Rob, anything from you, and how can they contact you?
Probably the best place is just on Twitter at Rob Greenlee, Greenlee. And I can be reached in email, rob@voxnest.com, if you want to reach out to me for whatever reason, even if you just want to chat. So give me a call, or send me an email. That would be great.
And I'm Todd at blueberry.com, or at Geek News is my Twitter address. So, Rob, just a little programming thing. We will be here Saturday. Next
Saturday. Yes.
Because my flight doesn't leave until 2, so I'm good. So I originally thought my flight was at 10, so I'll be able to host the show next week. And but yeah, I don't leave until 2 o'clock, and then I'll be out for 1 week. Well, I'll actually be out 11 days, but we'll only miss one show. So that'll be the week, whatever. I'll give you the information. But everyone, thanks for being here. And share the show with your friends, family members, and fellow podcasters. Let's get them schooled up. Everyone take care. We'll see you next time here on the New Media Show. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye, everybody.